Hey, it is me, Rich Hebblewhite, your Director of Programs Events here at Global Game Jam, and we are here for the final, it's very sad, but it's the final webinar of our official Global Game Jam 2026 Prep Week. Now, it's apt, I suppose, and almost poetic that you might say, that we circle back to the beginning and we talk about Global Game Jam next and our partnership with Games for Change. Now, you might remember at the start of this week, we kicked off with a brilliant session, also focusing on Games for Change and our partnership with Global Game Jam next. And this week, we're going to be doing exactly the same thing. And we're going to, through the magic of the internet, we're going to bring in today's guests and kick things off.
Hello.
Hi, guys.
Hello, everyone. Good to see you.
Yeah, it's lovely to have you here. I was just saying, it feels cool to kind of bookend the whole thing by kind of finishing with the same cool messages that we kind of started with. And I think that's really amazing. So as you guys know, we have a whole bunch of really cool diversifiers with Games for Change this year. And on the start of this week, we focused on one. And today we're going to be focusing on a slightly different one, but equally interesting topic. And that diversifier is called Outgrow Hunger. And it is, of course, one of the official Games for Change challenge themes. So I'll read it out briefly and then we'll jump straight into it because I know that you guys have got a short presentation for us. And then I think it'll be really cool to jump in and ask some questions and get everybody involved. So the challenge theme for Outgrow Hunger goes as thus. Design a game where players care for a natural space that feeds and supports a community. So it's a very, very interesting challenge, but I think it's one that has a huge amount of potential, both from a game design point of view. You can have lots of fun with it, but it's also a super serious subject, right? We could really change the world if we get this right. So just to get that started and hold that thought, I'm going to pass it to you guys and you can tell us a little bit more about what you're doing and how we're going to meet these challenges.
Absolutely. Sanka, you want to jump in?
Yeah, I'm happy to kick things off and maybe we'll just do quick introductions. So I'm Sanka Filipovic. I am part of our corporate partnerships team at WFP USA. And I have the super cool privilege of working with the gaming industry and gaming communities to support our mission. And kick it over to Nicole.
Thanks, Sanka. I'm Nicole Thomas. I am the Director of Social Media and Influencer Engagement at World Food Program USA. So Sanka and I work together to engage with different audiences in the gaming space to help support WFP USA that supports the World Food Program. I will let Sanka share a little bit more about what we do and about what World Food Program does.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Well, first, just to say we're super excited to be here. We love the fact that we have this chance to work with Global Game Jam and Games for Change to engage a gaming audience in these types of activations that are so meaningful, but also super fun. And so thanks so much for having us. So just to kick things off, first, just tell you a little bit about World Food Program USA. We are basically a US-based nonprofit organization that works to support the mission of the United Nations World Food Program. And WFP is the world's largest and leading humanitarian organization fighting hunger around the world. So WFP is present almost everywhere. So in over 120 countries and territories. So if you think of today's world's worst humanitarian crises or places where are being constantly hit by natural disasters and other factors, WFP is there and responding. So anywhere from Sudan to Gaza to Ukraine and so on. And our work is quite comprehensive. So it ranges from providing emergency food provisions as well as coordinating relief efforts across humanitarian systems and crises to really focusing on building long-term resilience in communities through planning for climate shocks, supporting local farmers and food systems, restoring ecosystems, promoting nutrition, and so on. So it's a very significant volume of work, but also necessary as the world is facing more natural disasters and disruptions, and unfortunately also due to conflict and violence around the world. So that's our role in this global system.
Yeah.
Nicole, over to you.
Thanks, Sanka. So Sanka did a great overview. We wanted to give you all some information about who we've served. And so a lot of this information is from last year. So WFP served over 70 million children. As Sanka mentioned, a lot of our work is in crisis situations, but we also do a lot of school meals. We are the largest school meal provider in the world. And a lot of these school meals are also they're sustained by the local communities themselves through farmer and small shareholder farmers. So there's a lot of really integrated work that WFP does. We've worked with over 66 million women and girls. So we support women through breastfeeding and nutrition during pregnancy and postpartum. And we've also worked with 27 million displaced people. So as Sanka mentioned, there's a lot of crises that are happening globally, and conflict is the number one driver of hunger. So when conflict arises, a lot of people emigrate to different countries, and so we support those people who have fled crises in different areas. And as mentioned, we support 1.9 million small-scale farmers. A lot of those are also typically women. So WFP does everything from supporting these groups of people through, as Sanka mentioned, through cash-based transfers, providing actual meal kits, supporting their local farmers, supporting their schools. So there's a lot of different integrated ways that WFP works. There's a little bit more information about how much food we have delivered and how much cash assistance. So as mentioned, WFP is the largest school meals provider in the world, supporting over 20 million children. We've provided 5.5 billion pounds of food. And so that also speaks to WFP is the supply chain of the United Nations. So WFP manages the warehouses, the airplanes, a lot of the ships and or trucks that are driving throughout the world. And so WFP is the supply chain of all of that, the logistics hub of the United Nations. So we do support UNICEF, UNCR. There's a lot of other organizations that do rely on WFP for our logistics side of things. I'm going to jump to our next slide to talk a little bit about some of the ways that WFP outgrows hunger. So some of these are examples to give a little bit of inspiration to what WFP does around the world. And so here you can see WFP, as Sanka mentioned, is in over 120 countries. So I wanted to just highlight some of the areas that we work in that showcase, again, the breadth of resiliency work that WFP does. In Guatemala, you can see our one of the people we work with there. That's in the Guatemalan Dry Corridor, where we have supported programs that implement and maintain climate resilient water infrastructure, nutrition sensitive agriculture practices, smallholder farmer support. And all of these things are supporting the local communities to then help them give back to the community, provide economic support to the community, and then also provide nutritious food. That's, as we know, it's the World Food Program. Food is at the basis of everything we do, but a lot of the work that WFP does is also centered around resiliency and providing support to the local economy so that eventually WFP and other NGOs do not need to provide that support. We want to make sure people have the tools they can use to support themselves and support their communities. Here we have a picture in Nigeria that is from, I believe, this last year. Nigeria experiences a lot of harsh weather. So this practice that is pictured here is called half moons. It is a way that WFP has come into this community to teach this local group how to refurbish, how to regreen that area. So these half moons are a practice that is used to resoil, and then when the rains come, they have different, and I believe in this picture there's different trees, mango, citrus, and papaya trees in this area, as well as green vegetables. We have some other really cool pictures about how these half moons do grow, and what kind of process that looks like. So it's another really interesting way that WFP is trying to fight the climate change impacts in these areas and local communities. Over here, we have some, I wanted to specifically call out some of the bee work we do, because Sanka and I were talking about various games, and we pulled up Bee Simulator. So WFP also works with local communities by also providing cash transfers. And so if there are communities that have different projects they want to work on, WFP can work with them closely and provide some of the funding to support those. And this isn't one example of that, because it's an income generating project supported by WFP. It helps the farmers boost their economic stability and cope with difficulties in that specific area. Kenya's experienced a lot of climate change impacts. There's conflict. There's a lot of displaced people in that area. So WFP does a lot of work in Kenya. Here we have a picture in Yemen of a fisherman. So this program was funded by WFP. It's a fully equipped fish center that has helped the fishermen in that area. It helps them store food, which is it's another program within WFP that you wouldn't think about storing food, but when you don't have proper storage, any food that you may catch or grow, if it's not stored properly, then it rots. And so this is an area where WFP came in and helped refurbish this fish center to improve the preservation of the caught fish and the working conditions for the people who work there. And that's transformed over 6,000 lives just in that little area of the fishermen who are working there. And lastly, wanted to highlight a very interesting program that WFP supports in Afghanistan. It's also another example of WFP's integration into local communities that are also supporting predominantly women who are working. These are women in Afghanistan who are cultivating saffron. And so this initiative was aimed to ensure that families have access to nutrition by giving them a job and supporting their livelihood. So WFP funded this program to help these women get this position where they can harvest saffron and then sell it back into their local community so that they can then afford to purchase food as well. And the majority of saffron collected in Afghanistan is done by women. So there's a lot of integrations between the work that WFP does with local communities, focusing on women and children, and supporting the livelihood so that people can support themselves. I am going to jump now, Sanka, to the next slide, if that works for you.
Awesome. Thanks, Nicole, for doing the hard part and talking about the programs and services and giving us all a flavor of
provide some inspo.
Yeah. No, thanks so much. Yeah, so let's jump into gaming and how it all connects to this. So I don't want to rehash the sort of reading out the theme of our student challenge. It's here and all of you can see it. But I think the part that I really want to sort of highlight here is that we intentionally kept this theme as broad as possible while still making it meaningful to our mission. Pretty much just to give you all the freedom to get really creative about your approach and ideas, but while maintaining that connection to some of the key things that are important to ultimately, hopefully, ending hunger in the world. So, issues like preserving nature and building connection across the global food systems, building communities that support wildlife and preserve ecosystems and so forth. So I hope that what this themes gives you all is a number of possibilities and pathways that you can explore through developing your games, which I think is exciting. And what I always find so inspirational about games is that I really can't think of a better way or one of the more powerful ways where you can transform your creativity and create connection and use play to really sort of make a tangible impact on the world through your messages, through teaching, through just spreading the word and inspiring people to potentially get involved in a way that works for them. But that's all to say that I don't necessarily think that video games that have a social impact component need to just be educational or literal in the way they're exploring real world issues like these. I think a lot of that really comes from ideas in games that emerge through, sort of playful mechanics or players making small choices or creating immersive worlds that are beautiful and inspiring and sort of evoke an emotion around some of these issues that are serious, but can be approached in a way that is more accessible and fun and inspirational. So all to say that, as you think about the student challenge and you join us to be a part of this, I hope that you'll remember that your game can be anything. It can be real life, sort of like model of what we're talking about, but it can also be very abstract. It can be symbolic, emotional. It can, it can be an adventure or survival game or a puzzle or a sim game, narrative experience. So all of that is on the table. And I think what ultimately matters here is just how players experience the world that you are building for them, and not necessarily how realistically you represent food and nature in your game. So we didn't highlight a few games here that I think kind of show just different ways that you can approach things and think about things. There are so many more out there. It's actually really awesome to see how many really beautiful video games exist that deal with these themes in different ways, but all are unique in a lot of ways. So I love adventure and survival games. Like, those are fun. I like a lot of action and movement and, obstacles and things. And I think that works for this theme as well. And the goal here doesn't necessarily need to be that you play a game where you just collect the resources to make sure that your character has enough energy, to survive the game. But it's also really thinking about how through the game you're restoring a balance or reconnecting fractured spaces within the theme of the game. So it doesn't have to be an apocalypse or a climate disaster. It can be a cozy game, but can still touch upon these themes and have a very clear purpose. So one of the games I wanted to highlight is Wildmender. I think it's one of the most beautiful games out there with its visuals. And it's also very cozy. You actually feel good playing it while you're doing things that are restoring your environment, and you're not extracting, you're not, in an apocalyptic environment. So it's all about ecological care. It's about resilience. And all of these messages are sort of ingrained in a way that isn't so overt, but you still get it and you still connect with it, which I think is super cool. The other game that I have been playing and have been excited about is Monument Valley 3. So I think also this is one of the most beautiful mobile games out there. It's a great puzzle game that also is not literal. So if you look at Monument Valley at a first glance, you might not necessarily think this has anything to do with climate and nature or food systems, because it's all very symbolic, and it's sort of the game like brings up emotional response to some of these things. And the way they do that is pretty subtle. It's through navigating challenges, where you have rising and falling water levels or rotating landforms. And that mirrors a lot of the real world challenges that we are facing. related to climate issues that we're facing, so it's where small disturbances have ripple effects. And you're seeking through the game, through solving puzzles, to sort of restore that balance. And I think it's a great example of one of these more abstract games still having a hard-hitting message as part of it. Strategy games, of course, like, I think you all have probably heard already from other presenters about Terra Nil, where you're basically a systems engineer, you take very deliberate actions. So it's more explicitly connected to the theme that we're talking about. But it's very important messaging. Food systems in this game are implied. They're not explicitly played, but it all sort of comes together as part of the game. And then sim games. So I hope from what I'm saying, I'm not discouraging any of you to sort of like disregard sim games or create like more explicit games around food themes and food systems. These games do tend to be literal in terms of what issues you're sort of trying to portray, but there can be super fun regardless. So that is definitely still on the table. And I think what's cool about sim games, especially related to nature and food systems, is that you can tackle it literally from any perspective. So the game we're showcasing here is the bee sim, which is cool. I love bees. And this game really sort of shows the importance of bees and how they feed into this much broader ecosystem that is important to all of us. And also how it's all interconnected. But if it's not a bee, it can be anything else. You could play it from a perspective of a colony of ants, or you could be a tiny cat farmer in a cozy game, or you could be a fox navigating habitat loss and food scarcity. So there are many different perspectives that you can approach a sim game from. And I think that's also offers you an opportunity to kind of go wild, maybe try something totally different and unexpected and experimental. And I think that is totally fine. I think the last thing that I wanted to sort of mention as part of this is that ultimately, it's not just about the game. So every single game that is created comes with messaging. So trailers, descriptions, screenshots, live streams where other people are playing your game and talking about it. All of this is part of the overall gaming experience, and it's not an afterthought. So that's why I think there are numerous opportunities where even if your game is not explicitly talking about a theme, there are many other opportunities to tackle those messages and get your point across. So I think just keep that in mind and don't get discouraged that if your passion is about more abstract or symbolic games, you have a role to play. And there's still a very clear way for you to inspire people to get involved, take actions without ever detracting from what games are ultimately all about, which is fun and having a good time and connecting with fellow gamers and people in this community. So that's what I'll say on this. And Nicole, over to you.
Thanks, Mika. You did a great job covering all of that. We're almost done with our presentation. We just wanted to share some pictures from last year's Game Jam event that was at the University of North Carolina in Greensboro. This event was on Fortnite, and so you can see some various images here from the games that were built there during that event. Just a little bit of inspiration. And it was just really fun for us to see our logos within the game itself. So we personally really enjoyed that. And then our last slide is just some contact information for ourselves, and then also for WFP USA. If you want to learn more about the programs, about what WFP does, you can visit us at wfpusa.org to see more about everything there. So I will come back, and I think that is everything for our presentation.
That was awesome. Thanks, guys. It gives you a nice overview, especially of the broad range of activities, because I think a lot of people have probably heard, right, of the World Food Program. It's because it pops up if you ever see the news, or if you don't really watch the news, but you're doom scrolling on social media, it pops up and you see it, and you don't often appreciate, what the scope of the kind of work that you guys really do and what you get involved with, and the impact that it has for many people in all kinds of weird and wonderful places around the world, all of whom are dealing with very different problems, but actually the same fundamental issue, which is a lack of food for one reason or another. And this is the amazing thing about this diversifier, in that just by talking about it and having these kinds of webinars, you start to realize, what? People need food, but the reasons why they don't have that food, it's just very, very different. And it's different in all types of places, and we need different types of solutions, and everyone has a different story to tell. And for me, that's the most amazing thing, in that we're able to sort of bring awareness to the range of issues, because it's not always because it's not enough rain. It's not always because maybe there's a war or something like this. It's so varied. It's incredible. Yeah. So what we're challenging you guys to do, who might be watching this, if you're interested in solving these crises, or at least helping us to raise awareness of these different types of issues, then this is a great place to start. I mean, this diversifier, it's where the action is, right? Really. So we've had a few people posting some interesting questions, and I know we had some submitted by you guys as part of pre-registration. So thank you for those of you who did register and post questions, because we always read all the different questions, and we'll sort of circle back and maybe have a look at those in a minute. Satoshi posted while you guys were chatting. My question is how to handle sensitive information and data while making fun games without trivialization of the issue. So how do you find that balance between telling people the way it is, but also, keeping it fun and lighthearted?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question, and something that we often talk to different gaming studios about, because we do very much want to be mindful of the communities that we serve, and not trivialize their experiences and hardship and so forth. So that's very much top of mind. I think in gaming, again, I think what's important to keep in mind is that, themes like this give you a lot of freedom to talk about broader issues. So food, growing food, or restoring ecosystems, or creating some sort of a logistics game where you're, transporting food and resources from point A to point B while addressing challenges and obstacles. So those are themes where I don't think you need to be so concerned about trivializing anything. It's very straightforward and important to all of us. But I think that's where, the thoughtfulness around messaging surrounding the game comes into play. And that's where I think you would need to spend a little more time to think about, what are you ultimately trying to send out there into the world in terms of your messaging? What is sort of the call to action you want to share with people and ask them to get involved? So that will require some thoughtfulness and research to do it in a way that is meaningful and mindful of people who are facing these crises. But that's also where we have a role to play. And that's why, putting our contact information out there is important because we want to be part of this. If you have questions, if you have concerns, if you want to brainstorm, we do represent organizations that are doing this work and can help with that. So there's all of that. But just to say, fun doesn't mean trivializing. I think we can definitely leverage fun to amplify messages and inspire people. And that's what we desperately need. So, I would encourage everyone to think of it that way and not necessarily as something that could potentially harm us in some way. I don't think that will happen.
I think that's a great answer, Sanka. We do a lot of storytelling, and so that's really, what these games are too, is telling that story. And so when we're telling the story of the people that WFP serves, there's always going to be that they're human beings at the end of the day. So maintaining their humanity and telling their story authentically and in a way that people then can engage with is also building empathy and building awareness for what other people may be experiencing. And so I think I lean more towards it's really important to be telling these stories and respectfully. And I suspect anyone who is building these games would be doing that in that way, as maintaining that these are just humans and other people who are in different circumstances than some of us are in. And it's really important to be sharing these experiences. So if it's from a simulation role, or if it's from someone in, a person in a space, you're telling that story too. And so I think that's an important way to look at it, or reframe some of the way we engage with these.
Yeah, I think it makes sense. And as you said, the classic simulation games, they do what they say on the tin, right? And, if you want to increase your population, you need more food. If I want to build houses, I need more bricks or whatever it's going to be, and you've got to keep farming away and producing. So I mean, those kind of games are quite good for hammering home the concept of logistical problem solving and how you do that. And as a good designer, by the way, the whole point of if I'm designing a real-time strategy game, then one of the things I would seek to do is to then apply pressure to those logistical points. So what you do is, if you're designing, a good map designer for a real-time strategy game would place choke points where people are likely to want to have to transport their resources from in order to encourage conflict and make the map more interesting. And hey presto, you're actually mimicking real life, right? Because these are the sorts of things that can happen in parts of. So I mean, there's a lot to be said, and I think if you're a designer, you just then tread carefully with respect to maybe your choice of wording. If you're who are the bad guys, who are the good guys, if that exists in your game, or you just tread carefully with respect to how you deal with those kinds of things, because we live in a litigious world, so we've got to be careful for things like that, and we've also got to manage our IP and so forth. But the things that we can do. Brian has posted. Oh, sorry, go for it.
I was just going to say, I think maybe one point of caution would be if you're building a game that is very real life-like. So if you are including characters that are very human and are portraying somebody in a humanitarian crisis that is facing hunger or conflict or a natural disaster, that's where I would say you would need to spend a little bit time thinking through how you want to portray those individuals, so you're not falling into stereotypes and sort of things that could be offensive, because the reality is the communities that we serve are everywhere. I mean, as we said, we're in 120 countries. That encompasses a huge range of people from diverse backgrounds, from different socioeconomic backgrounds and so forth. So that's where I would just caution people not to sort of fall into that, stereotypical portrayals of people in humanitarian settings.
Yeah, I agree. I think one nice way of, I wouldn't say maybe sidestepping it, but at least reducing the risk of straying into the problem that you're describing, is to go down the fantasy route and set it in a completely fictitious place with fictitious people that happen to be going through an ordeal that parodies the kind of things that we might be seeing in our real world. But then at least that allows you to avoid these sort of stereotypical references and cause an offense and so on and so forth. That's one, nice way you can kind of make life a little bit easier for yourself and reduce risk. And I mean, this may sound like we're being overtly cautious, but believe us, things have happened many times. All of us, if you Google it, you're going to find lots of examples of games that have fallen foul of censors and governments, and because they've used the wrong terminology, or they've been sort of packaged with a certain type of messaging that might be deemed offensive to a particular country or religious minority, for whatever many reasons, and it's happened many times. So you do have to be mindful. It's a real life problem, and we have to be mindful. So and respectful at all times. This is the most important thing. Brian posted an interesting question, and he was asking, how do you measure whether or not the games are actually creating an awareness or changing people's behaviors around food security? But I think you could apply that to any topic, really. How do you measure?
Yeah, that's a great question. How do we measure that? I mean, from our side of things, if we're looking at engagement and interest in some of these topics, and people within these different communities. So if we're going to be on Tiltify or Twitch, if there are people who are talking about food security or usually it's countries that are experiencing some sort of crises, and that those communities are having conversations around it. I know that there's been a lot of conversation around Gaza and the food insecurity there. And so those conversations have moved to streaming platforms like Twitch. So seeing these communities talk about these things is something that we do measure to see, okay, are these topics, is this breaking through some of the noise into other communities that are discussing this. 2 years ago, there was an earthquake in Turkey and Syria, and that was a large topic of conversation within the Twitch community because there were fundraisers then to raise money for organizations on the ground supporting people who didn't have access to food due to that crisis. So they're more anecdotal and ways in which we can try and measure and see, share of voice, how many people are talking about these things in social media and different communities. It is hard, though, to get some of that real firm data, but I'll let Senka jump in if she wants to talk to it a little bit more.
Yeah, I mean, awareness raising is huge. So, and the reality is, those of us who are coming from the nonprofit humanitarian space, our platforms are limited. I mean, that is the truth. We don't have the reach of some of the game studios or even gamers who have huge communities of super loyal followers and fans and players. And that's why these types of partnerships and engagements are so important to us, because you are allowing us to get in front of audiences that are otherwise probably inaccessible to us or would be really difficult to reach. So anytime we're able to do that, that amplifies our message. And that is, even if I can't give you the hard data, we know we're getting in front of thousands and tens of thousands of people that otherwise might not be watching and following us. I think the other ways is that we also engage in a lot of advocacy work. So when we, work around games and engage with gamers and content creators, we have very concrete actions that we're asking people to take to support our mission that are related to responding to a humanitarian crisis or urging our governments to increase funding to support these communities. And that stuff we can track. We can see how many actions people are taking and are engaging with us. And then, of course, I mean, I am a fundraiser, so I will bring that up too. Often we do enter into gaming partnerships to also raise funds. And that's a very tangible sort of measure. We can see how many donors we inspired to give to us and how much we collectively raised, and and then we can track where that money has gone to and what it's supporting. So those are different ways, but collectively, and why I think gaming is so important is that it allows us to do all of these things simply by galvanizing around a game or group of games and engaging with this community.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think they're both very, very good answers. And by the way, the method of measuring impact and or success, if you speak to any major organization and how they measure their impact, they're going to probably give you very similarly complex answers, because there's not necessarily, a single figure or stat that's going to show that. I'll give you an example of games that can impact, though. For example, a few years back, there was a game called Papers, Please, which you may have seen, which is quite famous, where you play as a border agency worker, and your job is to choose to stamp someone's passport and let them in or not, and you can deny them. So different people come to you, and it raised the whole debate about immigration. We know immigration, the dreaded I word, which I know is, even as we speak, a very divisive issue, and we won't go down that road and have that discussion right now. But the point is that as a game helped raise awareness of the issue and the decision making around it, and allowing players to gain a little bit of insight and to make some decisions becomes really important. And in terms of design, one of the key facets of what makes a game an interesting game versus a standard game or a less interesting game is the concept of choice, decisions, and the ability to see the impact of those decisions. So should I allow this person into this country, or should I not? And what might happen? Should I give this person some food or not? Should I save? Should I betray? Whatever, thoughtful decisions, and allow the players to digest the results of those decisions for good or for bad. And those are what things resonate in people's minds, and that's what makes the games interesting. And as you were saying, if you tie that up with an interesting narrative and things that make you think about it after the fact, that's how you get that kind of resonance and action that you can kind of invoke. And I think it's something really important. Will has posted a couple of questions. The first one is quite specific. He's asking, given that there's a rise of of low-cost smartphones in the global south, are you guys aware of any particular kinds of games that are quite popular with small-holding farmers and stuff like? Because he was referring to, there's a particular game that a lot of Indian farmers play in India because it does tractors and things like that. I don't know if there's something that you guys are aware of on your travels that's an equivalent.
That's a really interesting question. I do not know of any games. Sanka might, but it is very interesting. So WFP does work with cell phones. There's a lot of engagement with people's cell phones, because that is the best way to get in contact with people, especially if they are a displaced person. They still have their phone. And so we actually will send money directly to the phones, or send texts to the people's cell phones to let them know where to meet up to receive support from WFP. So it is a really interesting notion that there's games that people may be engaging with that we don't know about right now, but that's a really great question.
I would imagine that there is.
Yeah. I mean, I think we all know about the really fun, farming related games like Farmville or Stardew Valley and things like that. I don't know if I can specifically name games that, smallholder farmers are looking into. But I do know that farming simulator game is incredibly popular within these communities, and it is available as a mobile version too. So, and that's something that has been super interesting to us, especially because we are a partner of John Deere, and John Deere is heavily represented in this game. So you can play, you can learn to drive their tractors and equipment and how to harvest and so forth. And that's probably one of the best games out there where you can actually get that real life sort of feel for what it's like to be a real farmer navigating real equipment and so forth. So that's the one that comes to mind, although I feel like maybe it's a lame answer, but I would be very interested to hear maybe from the audience if they can think of any other games like that we should be looking into.
Right. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, definitely. And he also, Will, again, followed up with another question. He's asking about cutting edge tech and whether you guys have what kind of cutting edge stuff. And some examples that he's given are things like a blockchain or AI, or what kind. Is there anything like that you guys are kind of deploying in your work anywhere?
Yeah, so we also have WFP has an innovation hub, and so they work with people within the organization already, and they work with them to innovate some sort of new technology. And last year or 2 years ago, we partnered with Google's innovation hub, and so Google then mentored and helped support these innovators within WFP. And so I joined their presentation about the various projects that they were working on. And one of the projects that I thought was really interesting, or a couple of projects they were working on, was one, they were using AI within smartphones to help respond to questions when people were they were texting. So it was like a text response. And so they were trying to this very complex questions and complex situations. So they were working with people in conflict zones and trying to ensure that people were receiving the correct information to their cell phones about where to receive support. And it was a chatbot that they were trying to hone that and trying to really get it to participate and receive the correct answer, or receive questions and then be able to correctly respond. That was one really interesting way of using AI in the field directly. Another thing, and we, again, as we mentioned, WFP is the logistics hub of the UN, and they were using AI and various projection models to know where food and storages of food were in specific parts of the world, and then what would be the fastest, most cost-effective way of getting food from one space to another to the places that may need it the fastest. And it was a mapped out, it was a map that they were then trying to project and predict when crises would happen, or when there would be less food, or when there might be various seasons that impact food storage and ability to access it. So they were trying to use these predictive models about supply chain. And it, when you think about it, you're just thinking about it's literally warehouses full of grain. But it was so interesting to see how they were using AI to try and predict where that grain needed to be and how to get it there as cost effectively to use the funds that we raised in the best way possible. It was really, really interesting. If anyone wants to learn more about the Innovation Hub, we do have information about that as well, and various things that they've done. But yeah, I'll let Sanka jump in too.
Yeah, I mean, AI is playing a big role, and this is especially important now because, I think everyone knows that there have been funding cuts across the humanitarian system, so we need to utilize technology to help us with a lot of things, especially like the examples Nicole gave, and also using AI to help us sort of go through enormous amounts of data, whether it's related to like weather patterns or other factors that are contributing to food scarcity and hunger, to just give us a much clearer, faster picture of the situations that we're facing so that they can inform our response. So it's becoming, and it is a big sort of component of our work today, and it will definitely continue to be so.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And by the way, it's not just like popping in your car, going to the shop, buy some food and bring it home. And the logistical challenge of that is, how many bags do I have? How do I fit my food in my fridge? But
Right.
think about trying to get food from one country to another and the logistics of that. And it's not just, a few shopping bags. We're probably talking about thousands of tons. It's a completely different game. And yeah, and it's ironically, you could argue that the game industry had similar problems in the old days when everything was a physical cartridge. You had to ship thousands of cartridges from one place to another and put it in a warehouse, and then from the warehouse to the shop. And now, as everything's gone digital, obviously those things have kind of cleared away. And now, unfortunately, though, we haven't quite figured out a way of having to download food and eat it just yet. And that's the next piece of cutting edge tech. We can just download it and eat it.
Like some
3D printable food. Yeah, 3D printable food is what we need. Yeah, that would be awesome if we could do that. Somebody, if you're watching this, that's what we need. 3D printable food. Get on it. Yeah. A couple of people are making some interesting comments. Anna Maria said that they made a game with teachers at the Sitting Bull College last year, and it was about traditional plant knowledge. And she basically said she see that fitting in quite well. I think, any kind of game about foraging for food and what's edible, what's not edible, and teaching people, about how to, forage for your own food, or teaching people how to grow their own food is still perfectly valid and useful. Life skills is what it's all about, right? And
absolutely.
Yeah. And by the way, good games sometimes teach things. One of the questions that was posted, and I'll maybe segue into that because it answers the same question. Somebody who posted a question in the pre-registration form was kind of asking about how you build games that are educational but don't seem too educational, and you're trying to find that balance. And one of the examples I gave recently at a different webinar was I worked with some folks who designed a game to teach people the language of Welsh, because I'm a Welshman. That's where I live, Northeast Wales in the UK. But what they did was they made a perfectly normal game, but the actions and the names of objects and things in that game were all in Welsh. So you're playing the game and you're thinking, I'm just going to go and pick up this thing. I'm going to go do that thing with this thing over there. And all those things were in Welsh. And by the end of it, you've actually realized that you've picked up all these real life language words that you just didn't realize it. So sometimes training people how to do things can be done in a fun way. And the people playing the game don't really realize they're learning a real skill until after the fact. So if you're clever with the way that you design, you don't have to put it out there that this is an educational game.
Right.
Games can still be educational, even without that tag. It's just all about the method of execution. And I think it's an important concept.
It's interesting when sometimes when I talk to different gaming studios and we're discussing, okay, so what games do they have available that they could leverage to support us? And we're thinking about game sales and in-game activations, and the default is always to be like, well, we have this farming game that could be relevant. And what I've been desperately trying to sort of express in my conversation is it does not need to be that explicit. We can work with a racing game and find a connection or, to our mission in some way of, you're using vehicles. We're using vehicles. They're core to our mission. We're racing against time. We are, overcoming obstacles. Maybe in a racing games, you're overcoming different obstacles on the raceway. There's so many different ways where you can make these connections in a really subtle way. And I think that's what's so great is that all of these games, all of them have the potential of relaying a message and making that connection and, in subtle ways or in ways that just evoke emotion. And maybe it's after the fact that you're like, oh, like I picked up all these things.
The eureka moment. It's like, oh, it was all for a purpose. And it's like...
Exactly. There's so many, and that's what I get so nerdy and excited about gaming is because it's sort of endless in what you can do with them.
Oh yeah, we're doing God's work. That's what it's all about. We're just games change lives for real. It's that's what it's about. There's a couple of questions. I'm just keeping an eye on the clock because we're approaching the end of our hour. It's gone really quickly, as it always does. There's a couple of questions I wanted to circle back to because I thought they were really interesting. One of them, we've kind of dabbled with this already, but I'll ask the question anyway because I think it's quite a good one. Once you've raised players' awareness of world hunger, how would you direct their attention away from the game but back to the real life issue? Given, how might they take action? So what might be some techniques that can translate into a real world action, having maybe had that awareness raised? What do you think?
Yeah. So one of the first things I would think of is sharing that new information with like your networks. And so with your friends, or saying, you've just played this game that you've learned this experience on, and sharing that with people that WFP USA, we are a fundraiser. We try to drive as much awareness about what's happening, because we are majority funded we're entirely funded by donations. So we are funded by individuals and then also by governments. And so those two things, being individuals, if you're sharing this information with your friends, your family, if you're raising money, you're raising awareness for these real world situations, that's incredibly impactful. And then if that may not be an avenue that you want to explore, you can also raise awareness with your local governments. In the United States, everywhere except Washington, D.C. has a local representation. And so, speaking to your local representatives about funding for organizations that are serving our global populations, that is a way that you can get involved. And then I will always plug that if you're playing a game, stream it. Ask to donate to WFP USA. We're running campaigns for us, just sharing that message about what these communities around the world need support with. That would be, my answer. But Sanka?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would mention all of those things, definitely. But yeah, I just think it's important to help us spread the word. I mean, that is sort of like the first step that will lead to all of these other things. So whatever you can do to amplify those messages and themes is of huge support to us.
Yeah. And it could also be even just translating into small actions. It could be if the game inspires somebody to just go out into their backyard, dig it up and turn it into a little vegetable patch. Well, then that's awesome, right?
Yeah.
I've seen a few games, and over the last few years as well, there's been the rise of the traditional meadows making a comeback. Thinking about bees and insects, where pollinators, and these plant wildflowers everywhere, and those sort of calls to action come off the back of advertisements. There are games about things like that. So there are small actions that you can encourage people to be doing, as well as the big ones. So it all depends on where you're at. And I guess we could say it's context sensitive. So choose, what you're doing, and then what's the action you'd like people to kind of follow up with, and think about it like that. And I think that's a really cool way of kind of planning it out, right? So the world is your oyster with respect to that.
Yeah, thanks for making that connection, because it is all ultimately interconnected. So a local action can have a ripple effect. So it is really important to highlight.
Yeah, well, if just one or two people in every community just started to produce their own vegetables, for example, just a few, but everywhere, all over the world. I mean, that's it's like saying, if everyone in the world gave you, 10 cents, you'd have a lot of money, right? Just even if 10% of the people in the world gave you 10 cents, you'd still have a lot of money, right? So it all adds up, and it really does. And that's why we need you guys watching this right now to make lots of games that send out these messages, because it all adds up.
It does.
And you may not feel like it does, but it does.
Food waste is a huge contributor to food insecurity around the world. So, not wasting that food, that's a small thing you can do in your house today. Yeah,
100%, 1000%.
Yeah.
Okay, another question we had. I like this one, and I think it's probably a nice one to finish on. It asks for some suggestions for GGJ Next participants. It's asking, which concepts should we be introducing to middle school and high school students prior to developing their game? So it's a nice kind of teacher's question with respect to your middle school and then your higher school. So middle school, for those watching, that's like 11 to 14 or 10 to 14, and then 14 to 18, isn't it, for high school? For those of you that don't have middle school, high schools.
Yeah, that is a great question. So middle school and high schoolers, they're in school and they eat lunch probably every day, I would hope. And so access to lunch and to food during the school day is really important. And there's millions of children around the world who don't have access to that food. And one of the cool connections and things that we just talked about here and that people can do is gardens within those schools. So when young students can garden their own food and then eat that food is very interesting and something that they can do themselves. And WFP supports that around the world. I think that's just an immediate, what do you eat every day at lunch? And that is something that and kids can kind of grasp onto.
Yeah, I think that's really cool. I mean, in my boys over in the UK, it's very common that most schools will have something called forest school or forest club, like once a week, and they'll, where possible anyway, all schools will have some kind of small nature space. I mean, in Wales, where I'm based, we're very blessed that many of our primary schools and high schools, primary schools especially, have some really nice kind of nature spaces. And where I'm based in a small village as well, it's a very beautiful place there with huge oak trees and all this kind of stuff. And they have little campfires and they learn about nature and animals and insects and these different things. And of course, if you're a teacher, you can really kind of link those things in, and you can use a lot of places, by the way, who run GGJ Next sites do so by kind of linking the GGJ Next jam into their curriculum. So they'll do some class prep work, over a period of time, and then they'll segue into this jam where maybe you're going to work on something for half a day or whatever it may be, and you produce something as a result of those classes. So maybe think about linking it to your forest club if you have these kind of outdoor things, or as you were saying, Nicole, maybe if your school has a small vegetable garden or some kind of an equivalent thing. Think of a project around that and maybe link it into this theme for Global Game Jam and get kids thinking about stuff like that. So there are different ways that you can approach it. And I thought that was quite interesting. I just wanted to say, by the way, if you're interested in Global Game Jam Next, don't forget, as a program, Global Game Jam Next runs all the way through until March 15th. That's super important. Now, although you may already be aware that our formal application window for the normal traditional Global Game Jam has now closed, you can still apply to be a Global Game Jam Next site. So if you go to globalgamejam.org, and navigate your eyes just to the right of the screen. When you're there, you'll see a little button that says sign up a site for Global Game Jam Next, and you can still apply, and our team will reach out to you and take you through that process. And of course, what's super important, if you do apply to be a Global Game Jam Next site, we're in a position to offer you potential stipend grants to help you deliver your event and your jam. So there's plenty to do, plenty of time left to go if you're interested in Global Game Jam Next, which is really what we're thinking about in today's webinar. We're very much focusing on the Global Game Jam Next and the 3 challenge themes. And of course, today we're talking about Outgrow Hunger, which is one of those 3 key themes. Let me. Oh, Senka, thank you. Just posted. I was gonna say Senka's asked a question, and I was like,
I did want to just call out Games for Change. If you scroll down on this web page, you can see some of their lessons plans. So that could also give you additional ideas.
Awesome.
On how to bring this up in your classrooms. Yeah,
it's very, very good. Just this week, on Tuesday this week, I did another Global Game Jam Next jam with around 50 children at a school in Northwest Wales. And we focused on making board games. And we had actually, what I did, I introduced all 3 themes, which is what I've typically been doing. I've jammed with approaching 500 young learners across North Wales this last sort of 2 months or so, just from before Christmas up to this period, just shy of 500. And at each jam I've done, we've offered all 3 themes, and I've said, pick the theme that you prefer most, and we'll go with that. So of course, there's a selection of stuff, but I've seen so many great examples of projects that have been made with this theme in particular, and the kinds of games that have been made have been varied and fun. And some of them have been quite inventive, by the way, as well. And these are age ranges, everything from 10 right up to sort of 14, 15 age ranges. And I found some of the younger age groups to be the more creative. So I'm challenging you guys, so you've got to keep up with the youngsters, because they're kind of absolutely smashing it, and that is real. You know, so for all the guys that I've seen that have been jamming with me, you know, a big well done, and you know, I love every minute of it every single time, because it's great to see how everybody reacts and what they perceive and understand from the theme, and their way of interpreting it is very, very interesting. So let that be a lesson. You're never too young to be involved and start changing the world. You know, it's super important.
Totally.
Yeah. Well, I think we're just about out of time, guys. Yeah, again, it's just crazy, isn't it? It's crazy.
It is. No.
It's been great having you with us, and thank you for explaining about all the great work that you guys are doing, because it's hugely important. The more we talk about it, the better it is. And I hope that if you've been watching, that you've been inspired in some way to maybe get involved. And don't forget, by the way, you don't have to be at a Global Game Jam Next site to participate. You can also participate if you're at a standard Global Game Jam site by picking up one of these themes, and you can still enter onto the Games for Change portal as part of the Next Gen Challenge competition as well, which is eligible for ages 18 to 25. So there are plenty of opportunities for everybody to be involved, to have a go at pulling some of these themes. So have a go at that and make the best of it. So don't forget, as always, this coming Sunday at 5 p.m., we'll be releasing our official Global Game Jam 2026 theme. So if you're ready for that and you're all super excited, you can join us then this coming Sunday for that live reveal show. We'll have somebody from Games for Change with us, by the way, and a bunch of other guests and panelists, and then we'll be reacting to the theme once it's been revealed as well. And that will kick us off into the official Jam Week, which will start this coming Monday and go all the way through until weekend the following Sunday. So I'm really looking forward to that. Hopefully my voice will have recovered a little bit before then, because I can feel that it's starting to go. I talk too much. I talk far too much. And on that note, we could go and give everybody a rest. So, guys, thank you for coming. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for posting your questions for those of you watching as well. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and help us spread the message far and wide, especially about issues that are as important as this. It's an amazing piece of work that you guys are doing. So thank you again. It's been great spending time with you.
Much. Really
we will see you in the next one.
Bye. Thank you.